You're scrolling through social media and you see someone post about their $150,000 salary. The comments are immediate. They're rich, must be nice, out of touch with reality. Meanwhile, that person is sitting in a studio apartment trying to figure out how they're going to make rent because they live in Manhattan and after taxes, their take-home is barely covering expenses. Something is broken here, not with the numbers, with the labels. Because Americans have absolutely no idea what rich actually means anymore. And that confusion is costing you way more than you think. My name is Alex, and I've spent years analyzing income data, tax returns, and perception surveys trying to understand why people are so spectacularly terrible at assessing wealth. And what I found is fascinating and deeply troubling. Because the way we mislabel income isn't just wrong, it's warping your entire relationship with money, success, and your own financial reality. If you're trying to build real wealth and want to understand where you actually stand in the income landscape, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you see money more clearly. Here's the core promise of this video. By the end, you're going to know exactly what income levels actually qualify as rich according to hard data. Not according to your cousin who thinks anyone with a new car is wealthy. Not according to social media where everyone looks like a millionaire. According to the Internal Revenue Service, Census Bureau data, and actual percentile breakdowns. And more importantly, you're going to understand why getting this wrong is actively hurting your financial decision-making. Let's start with what people think. According to a 2023 survey by the Pew Research Center, when you ask Americans what income level qualifies as rich, the answers are all over the map. The median response for a single person was $200,000 per year. For a family, it jumps to somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 depending on who you ask. Those numbers sound reasonable, right? Upper middle class salary ranges, nice house money, comfortable retirement potential. Here's the thing though. Those numbers are measuring something completely different than what people think they're measuring. Because when most Americans picture someone making $200,000, they're imagining their own life with an extra $120,000 added on top. They're thinking about what that money would do for them in their current location, with their current expenses and their current lifestyle. And that mental math is creating a massive distortion. The actual IRS data tells a very different story. According to statistics of income data from the IRS covering tax year 2022, if you're a single filer making $200,000 per year in adjusted gross income, you're in approximately the 97th percentile. That means you're making more than 97% of American tax filers. Sounds rich, right? Except that same person in San Francisco or New York City is spending $4,500 a month on a one-bedroom apartment, paying 13.3% state income tax in California, dealing with federal tax brackets that take 35% of everything, over $231,250, and watching $700 vanish every month into student loan payments because they needed a graduate degree to get that job in the first place. But here's where it gets really interesting. The person making $90,000 per year in rural Ohio is in roughly the 73rd percentile. They're not even close to the top quarter of earners nationally. Yet their lifestyle looks completely different. They own a 4-bedroom house with a mortgage of $1,200. Their state income tax is under 4%. Their cost of living is so much lower that their spending power often exceeds the person making $200,000 in the expensive city. So which one is rich? This is the question that breaks the entire conversation. Because we're using one word to describe two fundamentally different things. Absolute income and relative purchasing power. And the confusion between these two concepts is creating a perception crisis that affects everything from policy debates to your own financial satisfaction. Let's walk through the actual income percentiles based on 2022 IRS data, because this is where perception and reality completely diverge. For individual tax filers, here's what the landscape actually looks like. If you're making $50,000, you're sitting right around the median, 50th percentile. Half of American workers make less than you, half make more. You are definitionally average. But if you're in the Midwest or the South with low cost of living, $50,000 can feel comfortable. You're not worried about making rent. You have some discretionary income. Life is manageable. Jump up to $75,000 and you're now around the 67th percentile. You're making more than 2/3 of American workers. This is where people start feeling like they're doing well. But it's nowhere near rich by any statistical measure. You're still closer to the median than you are to the top 10%. At $100,000, you've crossed into the 78th percentile roughly. You're in the top quarter of earners. This is where the perception problems start getting serious, because 100,000 has been the psychological benchmark for success for decades. It's the six-figure milestone, the number that parents tell their kids to aim for, the salary that's supposed to mean you made it. And sure, 100,000 is good money, but it's not rich. You're still 22 percentile points away from the top 5%. Now we get to 150,000. This puts you around the 87th to 89th percentile depending on filing status. You're in the top 11 to 13% of earners. And this is where people start throwing around the rich label with confidence. Except here's the problem. That person making 150,000 is probably a mid-career professional in a major city. They're a senior software engineer in Seattle, a physical therapist with their own practice in Boston, a project manager at a consulting firm in Chicago. They're doing well, they have career capital, but they're still showing up to work every single day because if they stop, the money stops. They have a mortgage, they have childcare costs. They're maxing out retirement accounts, which is smart, but that money is locked away for decades. Their lifestyle is comfortable, but it's not what most people imagine when they hear the word rich. Let's keep climbing. At $250,000, you're firmly in the top 5%. 95% of American tax filers make less than you. This is where you're finally approaching what data would call high income. But even here, the rich label is questionable. Because if you're a dual-income household in a high-cost area, $250,000 is two professionals making $125,000 each. That's two people with advanced degrees working full-time jobs. It's secure, it's affluent, but it still doesn't match what most people picture when they think rich. The word rich, in most people's minds, implies a level of financial freedom and luxury that simply doesn't exist at these income levels. Rich means you don't worry about money. Rich means you buy what you want without checking your account balance. Rich means you could stop working tomorrow and your lifestyle wouldn't change. For the vast majority of people in the top 10 or even top 5% of income earners, none of that is true. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of 90% of people who never question these assumptions. But don't stop now because the next part is where everything clicks. We need to understand what's actually causing this perception disaster. And there are 5 major forces warping your sense of what income levels mean. First is geographic distortion. Income statistics are national averages, but your lived experience is local. When you live in San Francisco or Manhattan or Seattle, you're surrounded by people making high incomes because those cities have economies built around high-paying industries. Tech, finance, consulting, law, medicine. The person making $120,000 feels broke because everyone around them is making $150,000 or $200,000 or $300,000. Your reference point isn't the national median, it's your ZIP code, and your ZIP code is lying to you. A 2021 study from the Bureau of Economic Analysis showed that real purchasing power adjusted for cost of living varies by as much as 36% between the most expensive and least expensive metros. That means a $60,000 salary in Memphis, Tennessee gives you roughly the same purchasing power as a $90,000 salary in San Jose, California. But nobody thinks of the Memphis earner as richer, even though their lifestyle might actually be more comfortable. Second is lifestyle inflation. This is the silent killer of perspective. When your income goes up, your expenses mysteriously rise to meet it. You get a raise, and suddenly you need the nicer apartment, the better car, the organic groceries, the gym membership, the streaming services, the weekend trips. Each individual purchase seems reasonable, but collectively they reset your baseline, and once your baseline resets, you feel just as constrained as you did before the raise. A University of Chicago study following household spending patterns found that for every $10,000 increase in household income, discretionary spending increased by an average of $6,200 within 18 months. People aren't saving the raise, they're spending it. and then they feel like they're still struggling, which reinforces the belief that they're not actually well off yet. Third is media distortion. Television shows and movies have been lying to you about what normal income looks like for decades. The characters on your favorite shows live in apartments they couldn't possibly afford. They eat out constantly, they travel, they dress in designer clothes, and their job titles don't match the lifestyle. You're watching a 30-year-old working in a coffee shop who somehow lives in a two-bedroom apartment in the West Village. You're watching a young journalist who can afford a brownstone. You're watching a teacher who takes international vacations 3 times a year. None of that math works in reality. But it resets your expectations. You start to believe that a middle-class income should afford an upper-class lifestyle, and when it doesn't, you feel like you're falling behind. Fourth is social media amplification. This one is brutal because it combines lifestyle inflation with carefully curated fiction. You're scrolling through Instagram and everyone looks wealthy. Expensive dinners, beach vacations, new cars, designer outfits, perfect homes. What you're not seeing is the credit card debt funding the vacation, the car lease they can barely afford, the fact that the perfect home is actually their parents' house, the outfit they bought specifically for that photo and then returned. According to research published in the Journal of Consumer Research, people systematically overestimate their peers' financial status based on social media by an average of 27%. You think everyone around you is doing better than they are, which makes you feel like you're doing worse than you are, which makes you think the bar for rich is way higher than it actually is. Fifth is income volatility and job insecurity. Even high earners don't feel rich if they're worried about losing their job, and the modern economy has made everyone feel replaceable. Tech workers watching mass layoffs despite record profits. Consultants working 100-hour weeks knowing they're one bad performance review from being managed out. Doctors drowning in student debt despite high salaries. Lawyers grinding as associates with no guarantee of making partner. The gig economy has infected even white-collar work. People making $200,000 don't feel rich because they feel precarious, and that precarity is real. Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows median job tenure has decreased steadily since 2000. People are changing jobs more frequently, often not by choice, and that instability changes how you perceive your income. It's not wealth if it feels temporary. Now we're in the home stretch, and I've saved something important for the end. Because this isn't just about correcting a vocabulary mistake. The way you mislabel income has real psychological and financial consequences, and most people never connect the dots. When you call someone making $150,000 rich, you're doing something subtle but destructive. You're moving the goalpost for your own success further away. Because if 150,000 is rich and you're making 70,000, then you're not even close. You're more than halfway away from the goal. That creates a sense of futility. Why bother saving aggressively or investing consistently when you're so far from the finish line? This is called the horizon effect in behavioral economics. When a goal feels impossibly distant, motivation collapses. But here's what the actual data shows. If you're making 70,000, you're already above the median. You're in the top half of American earners. You're closer to being comfortable than you think. The gap between you and financial security isn't as massive as the word rich makes it seem, but because you've mislabeled everyone above you as rich, you underestimate your own progress and potential. There's also a comparison trap that mislabeling creates. When you think people at higher income levels are rich, you compare your lifestyle to theirs and feel inadequate. You wonder why you can't afford what they can afford. You start to resent your own financial situation even if objectively you're doing fine. Social comparison theory tells us that people evaluate their own worth based on how they stack up against others. And if you're comparing yourself to a distorted benchmark, you're guaranteeing dissatisfaction. You'll never feel successful because you're measuring success against an impossible and inaccurate standard. Here's another consequence that almost nobody talks about. Mislabeling rich affects your political and policy opinions in ways you probably don't realize. When people hear proposals to tax the rich, they picture billionaires, private jets, mega yachts, multiple vacation homes. But when the policy actually defines rich as households making $400,000 or more, Suddenly you're talking about dual income couples who are both mid-career professionals. An engineer married to a teacher in a high-cost city, a small business owner, and a nurse. These people are high income by percentile, but they're still working full-time jobs. They're still saving for retirement. They're still worried about college tuition for their kids. They're not living the lifestyle that the word rich implies. And when tax policy treats them the same as someone making $10 million a year, it creates resentment and confusion. Not because the policy is necessarily wrong, but because the language doesn't match the reality. Let's talk about what rich actually means if we're going to use the word accurately. Based on income data alone, not wealth, here's a reasonable framework. If you're in the top 1% of income earners, that's where the rich label starts to make statistical sense. For 2022 tax data, that threshold was approximately $550,000 in adjusted gross income for an individual filer. At that level, you're making more than 99% of American workers. You have significant discretionary income even in expensive cities. You're building wealth rapidly if you're managing money reasonably. You have options and flexibility that the vast majority of people don't have. That's rich by income standards. But even that definition has problems because income and wealth are not the same thing. A person making $550,000 who spends $540,000 is not rich. They're high income but asset poor. Meanwhile, someone making $120,000 who has been investing consistently for 20 years and owns their home free and clear might have a net worth of $2 million. They're not high income, but they are wealthy. They have freedom. They have security. They could stop working and maintain their lifestyle for decades. That's closer to what most people actually mean when they say rich. This is why net worth is a much better measure of being rich than income. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the median household net worth in the United States as of 2022 was roughly $192,000. That includes home equity, retirement accounts, savings, and investments minus debts. If your net worth is over $1 million, you're in approximately the top 10% of American households. If you're over $5 million, you're in the top 2%. And if you're over $10 million, you're in the top 1%. Those are the levels where the word rich starts to accurately describe someone's financial position. Here's the shift I want you to make. Stop using rich as a label for income brackets you haven't reached yet. Start using accurate terms. Someone making $150,000 is high income, not rich. Someone making $250,000 is very high income, not rich. Someone in the top 5% by income is affluent, not rich. Save the word rich for people whose wealth gives them genuine financial freedom, ability to stop working without lifestyle change, the ability to deploy large amounts of capital without stress, the ability to absorb financial shocks that would destroy most households. When you use precise language, something interesting happens. Your own financial position becomes clearer. You stop feeling like you're failing because you're not rich yet. You start recognizing that being in the top 30% or top 20% or top 10% of earners is actually a significant achievement. You're doing better than you think, and that recognition changes your behavior. You start making decisions from a position of relative strength instead of perceived scarcity. You stop chasing the moving target of rich and start building actual wealth. Let's tie this all together because when you see how these pieces connect, everything changes. The reason Americans mislabel rich is because we're comparing our internal reality to everyone else's external appearance in an economy with massive geographic cost variation and constant lifestyle inflation pressure. We're using one word to describe multiple different concepts: high income, high wealth, high status, high consumption, financial freedom. And because all of those things feel related but are actually distinct, the word rich becomes meaningless. It's a label we apply to anyone who has more than us, which means it moves as we move. It's always just out of reach. That's not a definition. That's a treadmill. Here's what I want you to do instead. First, figure out where you actually are in the income distribution. Go look up IRS percentile data for your adjusted gross income. Find out if you're in the 50th percentile, or the 70th, or the 85th. Get the actual number. This isn't about ego. It's about accuracy. You can't make good financial decisions if you don't know your starting point. Second, calculate your purchasing power relative to your location. A $60,000 salary in Indianapolis is not the same as $60,000 in Los Angeles. Use a cost of living calculator and figure out what your income would be worth in a median cost city. That's your real economic position. Third, track your net worth, not just your income. Add up everything you own, subtract everything you owe. That number is your actual financial position. Income is a flow, wealth is a stock. You want to grow the stock, not just increase the flow. A high income that gets spent is worthless. A moderate income that gets invested consistently builds wealth that lasts. Fourth, stop comparing your financial position to people on social media or in your high-cost neighborhood. Your reference group is lying to you. The national median exists for a reason. It's the reality check. You're not competing with the tech executive who bought a $4 million house in Palo Alto. You're building your own financial foundation on your own timeline with your own resources. Fifth, redefine what rich means for you personally, not as an income target, but as a lifestyle and freedom target. How much money would you need invested to live comfortably without working? That's your rich number. For most people, it's somewhere between 25 and 40 times their annual spending. If you spend $50,000 per year, you'd need $1.25 million to $2 million invested to be financially independent using a 4% withdrawal rate. That's your real target, not an income number. A net worth number that buys freedom. The trap you've been caught in is thinking that rich is something other people are and you're not. But rich isn't a club with a secret handshake. It's not a status you achieve by hitting a certain salary. It's a mathematical condition. Do you have enough assets to maintain your lifestyle without selling your time? If yes, you're rich. If no, you're still building. And building is fine. Building is where most people are. But you need to know what you're building toward, and it's not a six-figure salary. It's a seven-figure net worth. Your future wealthy self, the one with options and flexibility and freedom, is counting on you to stop chasing the wrong target. The income number that sounds impressive but doesn't actually change your life. Start chasing the net worth number that buys your time back. That's the game. That's the math. And that's the reality that nobody talks about because it doesn't fit on an Instagram post or a bumper sticker. But it's true. You're not as far behind as you think. You're not as broke as you feel. And the goal isn't as far away as the word rich makes it seem. You just need to aim at the right target.